Welcome to a brand new episode of the Jampack Report today for November the 1st of 2019. Of course, my name is Samuel Adams, and this is a daily gaming news podcast meant to bring you the hottest stories from around the industry 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. If you enjoy the show, you like what you see, subscribe on YouTube, follow on a podcast service, or you can always check out the show in a daily digest format with links to the show on medium.com/JampackReport. But with that being said, today we have a ton of news to break down to round out the week because Nintendo Switch sales are up 50% between July and September as compared to the same time last year. You might know of a little thing called the Nintendo Switch Lite. We will talk more about how that factors into the success and why it might not be the only reason for success. And of course, as we all know, Nintendo has been having a stellar 2019 regardless of the jump in sales. Then, there were tons of Ubisoft games delayed last week, but it looks like that could have been for a good reason because they are all coming to the next generation of consoles as well as the current gen. Then we talk about Death Stranding reviews because the embargo has lifted. We now know just how good the critics say Hideo Kojima's newest game is. Then the Epic Game Store is adding tons of new features. The makers of Outlast are teasing their new game. Netflix has talked about the Witcher series, when we can see it, when you can see it. And finally, we have The Outer Worlds with colorblind support in a very unique way. We'll talk about that and more on today's show. But without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into today's top gaming news. Nintendo Switch sales are up 50%. The Nintendo Switch is doing quite well. According to the company's most recent financials, sales jumped 50% from July to September when compared to the same period last year. As Bloomberg reports, Nintendo sold 4.8 million Switch consoles during this period. Out of those were 1.95 million Switch Lites. Game sales also increased 48% due to titles like The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening. During the same quarter, operating profit increased to $615 million, which was higher than the company's estimates. Sale-wise, the Switch has already long passed the Wii U's 13.56 million, the GameCube's 21.74 million, and the Nintendo 64's 32.94 million units sold. It's on pace to leap the SNES's 49.1 million and the NES's 61.9 million units sold. Games like next month's Pokemon Sword and Shield will certainly help with that. And oh my gosh, it continues to be a worldwide sensation, and for good reason. The Nintendo Switch is a phenomenal piece of hardware. And on top of that, I have heard reports that the Nintendo Switch and the Nintendo Switch Lite are unique in that both of them have dedicated audiences and dedicated consumers that aren't looking at the other one. And that's the perfect place for Nintendo to find themselves because essentially, whenever you look at the 3DS, that was all kind of targeted to one specific group of people. Whether it was the XL, whether it was the original 3DS, whether it was any iteration of the console itself, you had people going after a 3DS. With the Nintendo Switch, it seems like those that want a Lite specifically want a Lite, those that want a regular Nintendo Switch specifically want a Nintendo Switch, and therefore sales for both tend to go up. Now again, 1.95 million of these Switch units have been the Nintendo Switch Lite, which is very impressive considering it was just released a couple of months back, and I'm standing behind my prediction that this is going to be the biggest selling piece of hardware for the holiday season. Now, with that being said, that's kind of without saying at this point because the sales of the PS4 and the Xbox One are down considerably, considering that we are on the cusp of the next generation. A lot of parents, a lot of kids are going to be saving their money, saving their parent tokens or whatever you want to call getting your parents to buy you a console for the next year, whenever the PlayStation 5 and whatever the Project Scarlett ends up being called do hit store shelves. But with the Nintendo Switch doing very well this year, I would say the Nintendo Switch Lite is going to be the hot item on the market considering just how affordable it really is for pretty much anybody that is looking for a big Christmas gift. This is the one that I would go for if I was a parent, and this is probably the one that I would want if I was a kid. With all of these things being taken into account, Nintendo Switch sales up 50% for July to September as compared to the same time last year. Good job, Nintendo. You out there killing it. However, Ubisoft is not killing it in the latter part of 2019 and the early part of 2020. However, it looks like later on they could in fact be killing it yet again. A lot of murder going on with Ubisoft, apparently. But the delayed titles, as revealed earlier, are also coming to the PS5 and Project Scarlett. Last week, publisher Ubisoft announced it was delaying the release of several major titles, including Watch Dogs Legion, Gods and Monsters, and Rainbow Six Quarantine. Following a financial earnings call this week, it appears that these titles, along with 2 unannounced games, are also set for launch on the next generation of console hardware. Ubisoft CEO Yves Guillemot revealed the game's cross-generational status when speaking with investors. The 5 titles, yes, they will be on this generation and the next generation, and they will take full advantage of all of the new features that are coming with the machines, which are actually going to be extremely interesting for players, said Guillemot. You will be able to download new content a lot faster. Players will experience better frame rates, and there are lots of very good elements that will come with these new machines. So it seems that the previously announced delays might not have been strictly to improve the quality of the titles. Given that Sony's PlayStation 5 doesn't launch until winter 2020, this would suggest that Watch Dogs Legion et al. Might not see the light of day for some time, depending on how comfortable Ubisoft is with the time gap between launching their wares on current platforms and next-gen hardware. This is a very wise move because of the fact that there was so much writing on these specific games for Ubisoft. I mean, think about the weight that a Rainbow Six game carries. Think about the weight that a Watch Dogs game carries. Now, of course, Gods and Monsters yet to prove itself, but still a very exciting looking game. And then you have the 2 unannounced games from major IP. So you're talking about pretty much a Far Cry and an Assassin's Creed, if what people are reading into the situation are to be believed, or is to be believed. Now, with Ubisoft delaying these titles, again, very wise move, because if you can hit the ground running on the next generation right out of the gate and have potentially 3 to 5 launch titles in a perfect world for Ubisoft, that means you are dominating the third-party games right out of the gate. Now, with the beginning of the PlayStation 4 cycle, we did see an overabundance of first-party titles because some developers were not ready to pump out third-party titles on the PlayStation 4 at launch, which left a lot of people playing between 3 and 5 games for a good long while. With Ubisoft getting in early and making some of their games cross-generational, presumably on day one, that means they're definitely beating a lot of other people to the punch. Now, if, again, that is the perfect scenario, that might not be what you get. You could be getting these games a year after the release of the consoles. You could be seeing them get 2 different releases, one on the Xbox One and PS4, one on the next generation. Who knows exactly how this will go down. But if you are curious, it looks like Watch Dogs Legion, Rainbow Six Quarantine, and Gods and Monsters, as well as 2 unannounced projects, are going to be coming to the next generation as well as current-gen games. Now, nothing has been confirmed as of yet, but Death Stranding very well could come to the PlayStation 5. It's coming to PC next summer, and then on top of that, we now know just how good critics say that it is. The embargo is up. Let's dive in. With Death Stranding's review embargo officially up, we are rounding up what other gaming outlets have said about Kojima Productions' latest, and the top line is, it won't be for everyone, they say at Games Radar. Our own Leon Hurley has spent a lot of time with the game, and in our Death Stranding review, he eloquently sums up the game's exterior beauty, while arguing the central gameplay doesn't quite sustain itself over time. In Leon's words, there's an okay experience here, filled with scrapbooking, hokum of afterlife mythology, and pseudoscience, with a cast of likable, if bluntly literal characters. But it's a game that, ironically, is easily lost in its lengthy delivery. But there is plenty of opinions across the board, with some outlets heaping praise on Kojima's latest, with others a bit more reserved in their assessment of the game. And so here is the review roundup. Listen closely for your outlet of choice. Push Square gives it a 10 out of 10. EGM says 5 out of 5. The Sixth Axis says 10 out of 10. GameSpot has a 9 out of 10. Eurogamer gives it a recommended rating. Kotaku and Polygon have unscored reviews because, of course, that's sometimes how people do things. The Guardian gives it a 4 out of 5. Destructoid gives it an 8 out of 10. Game Informer says 7 out of 10. US Gamer says 3.5 out of 5. IGN coming in low with a 6.8 out of 10. VGC coming in with a 3 out of 5, and VG247 also with a 3 out of 5. At the time of writing, Death Stranding currently sits at 82 on Metacritic. I believe I checked it was 81, which is a very good score indeed, putting it on par on site with Control, Call of Duty Modern Warfare, and the PS4 release of Outer Wilds. The even better news is that it's now only a week away from launch on PS4, so we'll all be able to sample Kojima's latest concoction this time next week on November the 8th. Now, I will say that I have been scouring Twitter. I've been seeing a lot of reports about the reviews, and for me, this is not one that I'm going to be picking up. I said on Twitter that I might watch some on Twitch. I might rent it one weekend whenever I've got a little bit of extra time. But I think what it ultimately comes down to is that Kojima's Death Stranding is going to be something that is certainly not for everyone because of the fact that it does take a specific approach to really understand what Death Stranding is as a game. It's not trying to be an action-packed, exploration-filled game. It's got a story to tell. There is plenty to do, but I've heard some people say that it kind of slogs along. I've heard some people say that it can get dull with the gameplay. I've heard some people say that it is a gorgeous, gorgeous experience, but at the same time, it's held back by an antagonist that you can't really connect with, which, to be fair, you do have Norman Reedus, who can be kind of hard to connect with, in my opinion, on screen. Again, these are all just my own opinions, but at the same time, it looks like Kojima's newest game is certainly dividing critics and fans alike. Now, I will say, Kojima retweeted a post, I believe it was actually this post, that showed that outlets were kind of mixed at the end of the day. Now, that's not to say that the ratings received, aside from the IGN rating, were bad ratings. Anything from a 7 to a 10 out of 10, in my opinion, is a pretty good rating, all things considered. But considering this is one of the biggest Sony first-party titles of the year for a console exclusive, kind of shocking, honestly, to see just how low some of these outlets are going. But again, still getting rave reviews, some middle of the road, but at the same time, it is Death Stranding. It is Hideo Kojima. He is not going to be for everyone. And of course, neither is Death Stranding. But with that being said, if you want to play the game where a baby cries from your DualShock 4, it comes out November the 8th. If you do want to dive in and see what the hell is going on with this one, because I have no idea. But if you don't want to dive into that, Epic Game Store has you hooked up with tons of offerings, and on top of that, they've got some new features that have come and are coming to their storefront. Epic Games has rolled out an update to its digital storefront that gives users the ability to view trending games, browse by genre or features, see what's on sale, what's been recently updated, and more. It also shared a look at some of the big new features in development, including a wish list, continued improvements to the library view, and critic reviews on store pages. The Open Critic partnership is interesting because Epic has been very careful about how it handles reviews on the store page. Epic CEO Tim Sweeney said last year that Epic was working on a review system, but that it would be opt-in for developers in order to avoid issues with review bombing. But some gamers, such as in this Reddit thread they linked to, believed that an opt-in system will enable developers to avoid valid criticism. Integrating Open Critic reviews into its store pages will make it easier for users to figure out which games may be worth their time, but it doesn't address the core complaint that people, individually or in groups, should be able to use reviews to express their displeasure about whatever. An Epic Store wish list will be nice, although speaking for myself, the author says, I have no doubt that it will end up a forgotten litany of games I was briefly interested in before they were pushed out of my consciousness by the announcement of other games that also seem really interesting, so I'll add them to my wish list, and on it goes forever. As for the library views, Epic said only that it is updating the visuals for the grid to better align with the new presentation of games on the storefront and make multiple polish improvements to the list view. Epic has also made some behind-the-scenes changes to its store to better handle high volumes of traffic, added Thai language support, and has begun implementing 3D Secure in order to bring the EGS into compliance with European regulatory requirements. And so, the Epic Game Store is continuing its improvements. Now, this is something that many people have been talking about over the course of the past year and a half, where the Epic Game Store has until now been very, I suppose, lackluster. It's been very featureless. It has left a lot of people wanting more at the end of the day, and really what you have here is the first step towards making a more complete storefront experience. Once you build out that library, you are going to be able to explore it in a more easily explorable fashion. On top of that, the ability to view what games are trending, to see sales, to give different filters to actually sort through the giant litany of games that is offered from the Epic Games Store. These are things that should have been there from day one, but it's good to see they're finally coming. And of course, with the new features that are out now, a good step in the right direction. But I mean, browse by genre. Why was that not a thing? You know, I hate to linger on the past, but come on now, you know. But Interesting to see the Open Critic partnership. I feel like this might not be the best way to handle reviews. And really, if you do want to integrate fan reviews into anything that you do, it's going to come with a cost. You are going to have people that do review bomb. You are going to have people that express unrelated opinions in the review section if a company makes a poor decision. Should that or should that not be included in the review of a game? Is that relevant to the quality of the game? That is something that is up for debate. A lot of people would say yes, a lot of people would say no. But at the same time, right now, the digital storefront is making some big improvements, and I think that the Epic Games Store is certainly finding an audience, even with the outcry of many people who are not fans at all of what you would get from the Epic Games Store. But you could be playing Outlast on the Epic Games Store. In fact, Outlast 3, if the newest teaser is to be believed. The makers of Outlast tease their next game. This is what we've got right here. Announcement coming soon. Where freedom ends, you have this image, and now back to the article. The intriguing image above was posted by developer Red Barrels very appropriately on Halloween, with a promise to reveal more soon. Red Barrels is the dev of first-person horror games Outlast and Outlast 2, but this tease doesn't necessarily mean we are about to get an official announcement about Outlast 3. Messaging about Red Barrels' next game has been mixed. Back in 2017, Red Barrels said on Facebook, "We will at some point make an Outlast 3," but in the same post stated it was working on something else. It won't be a sequel to Outlast or Outlast 2, but it will be a distinct experience set in the Outlast universe. And in 2018, developer Felipe Morin of Red Barrels said that Outlast 3 itself would be a departure from the first two games in the series. Sounds like a dungeon scrolling RPG. So this definitely could be Outlast 3, but in a way that doesn't really feel like a sequel. Or it could be something else that's not a sequel, but is still related to the world of the original games. Very confusing. The image might give us a few clues. There's a tag around the wrist of the lower arm that reads MK329 and then 3 more digits they can't quite make out. 800 perhaps? And if you want to take the image extremely literally, you could speculate that the two clasped hands might hint at a co-op horror experience. Ooh. And so it's since the Outlast games revolve around MK Ultra experiments, it is safe to reason the tag is connected somehow, but whatever this is, a spin-off or a sequel, we are curious. Outlast 2 was pretty damn good, they say. And so, of course, this would make sense to be a brand new Outlast game, considering that the Outlast 2 game is going to be given away for free with PlayStation Plus in November. So if that is any hint, you are going to be seeing some kind of Outlast reveal coming next month. Now, weird to see it come out at a strange time that's not necessarily around Halloween, because a lot of horror games do launch year-round, but some of the biggest ones tend to come out towards the beginning of October, maybe late September. But with that being said, if you do want to read into the time frame here, you could be seeing the game come out maybe sometime in the spring or summer of 2020, and then hit the newest generation of consoles when they launch next fall/winter. That could be the plan there. On top of that, you could just be trying to line up a discount. So if you launch the game at $60, then by the time next Halloween rolls around, everybody is going to be buying it to play on Twitch with their friends, whatever they might be doing, for around $30, and you would see a huge boost in sales. But I'm not a marketing guy. Who knows what's actually happening here? So if you were curious as to what Red Barrels was working on, it looks like it could be something set in the Outlast universe, a brand new horror game. But The Witcher is coming to Netflix, and we now have a release date alongside a brand new trailer. On December 20th, the long-awaited Netflix adaptation starring Man of Steel's Henry Cavill finally arrives. Based on Andrzej Sapkowski's, God, I massacred that name, influential novels, The Witcher will cover material prior to the beloved CD Projekt Red games, meaning both fans of the games and newcomers will have something fresh to look forward to. Check out the enticing trailer below. And of course, I'm not going to play this because copyright law, but with that being taken into account, this game does look to be pretty impressive. I say game, I mean TV show. Same difference, you know, at this point in the time. But if you do want to check out the trailer, would highly recommend it. You have the bathtub scene with Henry Cavill instead of Geralt of Rivia, but I mean, I suppose they're both synonymous. Overall, I believe this is going to be a very good time. The fan reaction, the reaction on Twitter, I should say, has been very positive. A lot of people saying, how do we get from this to this? And they put in the original Henry Cavill in a clear gray wig to what we have with the final product, and they are very different entities. The final product, much better than the original pictures that we saw from the set. Now, if you do want to dive in, again, launching December the 20th on Netflix, and I would recommend it. because it looks like it could be a very, very good show. And I'm glad to see it's not tying in directly to the original games from CD Projekt Red. I would love to see something set in the universe, because I could never really get into The Witcher. I played a bit of 2, I played a bit of 3, but overwhelmingly it was just too dense of a game for me. There was too much to do, which is the best complaint I could ever possibly have about a game. And so to be able to understand who Geralt of Rivia is, to be able to dive into the TV show, maybe that could get me back into the games. And who knows, you could be seeing maybe a sequel coming down the pipe. You never know. I think it's inevitable, but everybody's focused on Cyberpunk 2077. Now, to round out today's show, The Outer Worlds doesn't have a colorblind mode, but it's for a good reason. Plenty of games have colorblind modes tucked away within their settings menus. There you'll typically find several options to cater to the various types of colorblindness which exist. One game without a colorblind mode, however, is Obsidian's The Outer Worlds, because the entire game was designed to be played without any important information conveyed through color. The detail was noted on Twitter last night by studio design director Josh Sawyer, who explained it was a choice led by Tim Kaine, one of Obsidian's directors who has near monochromacy colorblindness. I think I pronounced that correctly. The Outer Worlds is available now on PC, PS4, and Xbox One, where it is available through Game Pass. Edwin on Eurogamer deemed it RPG comfort food in Eurogamer's The Outer Worlds review. But very cool to see that we are in fact getting a completely colorblind-friendly game. And I'm sure this is not the first one, but in my mind, this is the first major game that has been completely and totally compatible, acceptable, whatever you want to call it, by default. That's amazing that you were able to design something in that specific way. I think that games are an incredible medium because they are one of the most accessible mediums. You have people making custom controllers. You have Microsoft really going all out with the adaptive controller, I believe it's called, where you can pretty much customize every single input to do what you need it to do. To be a true gaming aficionado, you can play whatever you want these days, regardless of what holds you back. And that is something that is absolutely incredible to me. Now, of course, colorblindness is not necessarily incredibly limiting, but at the same time, definitely a hindrance for a lot of people who just design games for the general public and don't necessarily take into full account what that means for those with disabilities of a variety of types. But if you do have colorblindness, you don't have to worry about flipping on any kind of switch in the menus, because the entire game is compatible and acceptable. Accessible, perhaps, would be the better word. Yeah, with your specific issue. But with that being said, that rounds out today's episode of the Jampack Report. If you enjoyed this one, drop me a like down below if you are watching on YouTube, or you can always follow and subscribe on podcast services around the world. The show is available in a daily digest format on medium.com/jampackreport, and that is everything that I need to peddle to you, because hey, if I don't try and sell you my wares, no one's going to buy them, so to speak. But with that being said, I'll be back on Sunday with an episode of The Drop. The Jampack Report resumes on Monday, but until then, have a phenomenal rest of your weekend. Welcome to the holiday season, and peace.